Look at human history. It is a continuous, fragile cycle of peace, interrupted by sudden, catastrophic division. When the drums of conflict start beating, something terrifying happens to the human mind. People who were peaceful neighbors yesterday suddenly perceive each other as absolute threats today. But why? Why does the mere concept of war change our behavior so drastically? We often blame politics, history, or leaders, but the truth is far deeper and much more uncomfortable. War does not just happen on a battlefield. It begins in the ancient, hidden architectures of our brains. It is driven by biological fear, the blind obedience to authority, and the deeply ingrained psychological illusion of us versus them. Welcome to Map Psychology. Today, we step away from the daily news and map the chilling cognitive mechanisms that divide humanity. This is the psychology of conflict. To understand why societies tear themselves apart, we must first look inside the skull. When a crisis erupts, be it a military conflict or a global threat, our brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, hijacks our rational thinking. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic and nuance, is suppressed. We are instantly thrown into a primitive fight-or-flight mode. But humans are uniquely cursed. We are the only species fully aware of our own mortality. In psychology, this is explained by terror management theory. When a war dominates the headlines, our subconscious fear of death is violently awakened. To manage this paralyzing terror, we desperately cling to our cultural safety nets. We wrap ourselves in flags, ideologies, and national identities. To truly grasp this, we have to look at what psychologists call mortality salience. In dozens of laboratory studies, when researchers subtly remind participants of their own death, something fascinating occurs. Judges give significantly harsher sentences to criminals. People become visibly more hostile to those of different political or religious beliefs. They vote for more aggressive leaders. The brain, terrified of its own expiration date, tries to achieve a form of immortality by attaching itself to something bigger that will survive, a nation, an ideology, or a war effort. We don't just fear the enemy, we fear our own insignificance, and war gives us a terrifying yet intoxicating sense of purpose. Under the shadow of mortality, the human brain demands certainty. We lose our tolerance for ambiguity. Anyone who looks like us, thinks like us, or belongs to our group becomes a psychological shield against the chaos, and anyone outside that group, they become the threat. When fear overwhelms a population, the collective mindset regresses. We seek a savior. We look for a strong, unwavering authority figure who promises to restore order. As we explored in our documentary on the Milgram experiment, ordinary people are disturbingly willing to inflict pain on others if instructed by a perceived authority.
Wrong. 150 volts. Answer horse.
Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
But in times of war, this dynamic becomes even more dangerous. The fear of the enemy provides the perfect justification for extreme obedience. People willingly surrender their personal freedoms, suppress their individual conscience, and accept aggressive policies they would normally reject in peacetime. We trade our autonomy for the illusion of security. The narrative is always the same. To survive, we must unite, and to unite, we must obey, without question. This brings us to the core of human conflict, the terrifying ease with which we divide the world into us and them. In 1954, social psychologist Muzafer Sherif conducted the legendary Robbers Cave experiment. He took 22 normal, well-adjusted boys from identical backgrounds to a summer camp. He divided them into two arbitrary groups, the Eagles and the Rattlers. Through the manipulation of limited resources, simple games for a pocket knife or a trophy, Sherif created an artificial war. Within days, these perfectly normal boys were burning each other's flags, raiding cabins, and describing the other group with animalistic, degrading terms. But Sherif didn't just study how war starts, he studied how it ends. After days of violence, the researchers tried to bring the boys together for pleasant activities, like watching movies or eating meals. It failed miserably. The food fights and insults only worsened. Sherif realized that simple contact is never enough to erase deep-rooted prejudice. So, he orchestrated a series of crises that threatened both groups equally. He sabotaged the camp's water supply. Suddenly, the Eagles and Rattlers had to forget their blood feud and work together to find the leak. Later, he staged a breakdown of the camp's food truck, forcing all 22 boys to pull the same rope to get it out of the mud. This is what psychology calls a superordinate goal, a challenge so massive that it requires the cooperation of enemies to survive. The borders didn't dissolve through empathy, they dissolved through shared necessity. This is the psychological process of dehumanization and rehumanization. To bypass our natural empathy, our brain must first convince itself that the target is less than human. The outgroup becomes a faceless entity. Wars are fought on this exact psychological foundation. In the fog of conflict, the first casualty is not the soldier, it is objective truth. Driven by survival instincts, we fall victim to confirmation bias. We actively seek out propaganda that demonizes the enemy and glorifies our own tribe, while entirely ignoring any data that contradicts our beliefs. We lose our capacity for independent thought. But the architecture of our mind does not have to be our destiny. The ancient Stoic philosophers mapped this cognitive battlefield thousands of years ago. Thinkers like Marcus Aurelius taught that while we cannot control the chaotic events of the external world, the wars, the politics, the narratives, we retain absolute power over our own minds. Modern cognitive psychology confirms this ancient wisdom. The pause between an external trigger, like a terrifying news headline, and our emotional reaction is where our true freedom lies. If we let fear close that gap, we become predictable pawns in someone else's war game. True resilience lies not in blind positivity, nor in surrendering to the collective anger of the tribe. It lies in observing the world rationally, accepting reality without letting panic dictate our actions. When we understand how easily our brains can be manipulated by fear, authority, and artificial borders, we reclaim our autonomy. We realize that the line separating us from them is often just a fragile construct drawn in the sand by those who benefit from the division. Thank you for exploring the depths of the human mind with Map Psychology. If you value mapping the truths behind our behavior, subscribe and join us in the next episode.